use it wisely.
I will not use it wisely. See, there you go. I'm already in control. How are you guys? Excellent. That's it. I understand we've got quite an international audience today. In Dubai and the UAE, did you know that this is Fraud Week? How many of you knew that? See, I can't really see because of the lights. I'm just going to assume all of you knew that. That's it. So, my name is Matthew Griffin. I'm the CEO and founder of the 311 Institute, a global futures and deep futures think tank, working with actually quite a number of your country's governments in Saudi Arabia, the Middle East, UAE, on the future of cybersecurity. Now, in this particular presentation, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through the ultimate multiplier, but I seem to have spelt it wrong. So can we guess what the ultimate multiplier in 2024, 2025, 2026, 2027 might be? Has anyone got any ideas? It's kind of been the topic of this year, right? Oh, at least one person knows. That's it. That's it. Evidently, none of you have been attending conferences this year. Now, when we have a look at AI is already doing a lot more than we think. We can use it for threats. We can use it for defense. So let's go and have a look at what we call the orbital perspective. And let's take a new view of the world. So when we take the orbital perspective, when we go into space, astronauts have this vision of the Earth that they call the orbital perspective. It's a beautiful perspective, they say, because from 600 miles up in space, the world looks straight forward. There's no wars, there's no boundaries, there's no politicians. That's it, we'd all like that at the moment, wouldn't we? However, as we come down to ground, everything seems to get more complicated. By 2040, we should have 65% of people living in urban megacities around the world. We have 8 billion people on the planet now. 3.5 billion of those are connected. Cybercrime is affecting $7 trillion of the global GDP. We have activism and protests. We have wars and conflicts. On top of that, we are producing 2.2 billion tons of waste, 57 gigatons of carbon dioxide, which we pump into the Earth's atmosphere. 40% of the world's crops are being destroyed, and we have fires in the Arctic and in Siberia. The world has challenges. We have Category 6 hurricanes emerging in the United States and Japan. We have extreme weather wiping out different parts of Europe, for example. But despite all of this, despite all of these challenges that make us hide our heads, we have pioneers who are building the latest and greatest things. We are electrifying industry. We are transforming how we do agriculture and produce food for the billion people who don't have access to food. We're changing what we teach and how we teach our children. We have technology pioneers who are developing incredibly science fiction-like technologies. Healthcare pioneers that are extending human lifespans in ways that you can't imagine. And then, of course, we're not just changing our own physical world, we are changing the digital world, and we are creating new virtual worlds that all need defending as well. So when we have a look at the world that we're actually in, increasingly I sort of say that, fortunately for all of us, there's only one thing that's changing. That's good. Just one thing to get your heads around. Unfortunately, it happens to be everything and changes faster. When we have a look at changes in society, technology, the environment, economics, and political stages, everything is changing. And this can be confusing. It can lead to a complicated vision of our world. And when we have a look, for example, in the boardroom, 55% of what happens to your companies actually happens from outside your companies. Now, when we talk about cyber and cybersecurity, one of the phrases that always comes to mind is this concept of, it's a game of cat and mouse. How many of you have heard that? It's a game of cat and mouse. Yeah? You've all heard that phrase. But have you actually considered that last year, we estimate cyber criminals took about $1.2 trillion in crypto, ransomware heists, and all that kind of stuff. Last year, it's estimated that cybercrime had a $7 trillion impact on global GDP. So when we say it's a game of cat and mouse, firstly, I think we're the mice. But if we kind of stick to this analogy, have you actually considered that the mouse that you're actually after is the size of a skyscraper with the resources of Google or Alibaba or whoever it happens to be? This is what we're up against. So increasingly, we need to find new multipliers. And that's what we're doing. And our multipliers are the communities that we build, the partnerships that we forge, and the technologies and tools at our disposal. Now, if I asked you this question, and it's going to sound a little bit provocative, what do you think the average IQ in this room is? How many of you would say the average IQ is between 100 and 125? Hands up. Okay. Excellent, thank you. How many would say that the average IQ is between 125 and 150? Hands up. Excellent. There's some very confident people there. I love that. You are a genius. Now, this is Albert Einstein. He had an IQ of 155, and actually, everyone is wrong. You do not have an IQ of 100 to 150. You have an IQ bordering on 300. Do you know why? AI. The things that you have in your pockets and on your possession today, your smartphones give you access to all of the world's knowledge. They give you access to artificial intelligences like ChatGPT, for example, that has a verbal IQ of 155. That have 1,000 times more general knowledge than any human, and that learns 300 million times faster than us. By thinking that you have an IQ in the region of, say, 120, 125, you're kind of forgetting that you have access to incredibly powerful and sophisticated, not necessarily intelligent technology. So increasingly, today, we are using these new technologies to help us mentor new people. We can upskill and onboard people in the cyber community 12 times faster than ever because we have artificial intelligence tutors, and we're doing it. Increasingly, artificial intelligence basically is your teammate, your co-worker, and in different parts of the world, your boss, but we won't discuss that. We're using it to train new things in new ways. If you want to learn the latest cybersecurity techniques, get out your phone, use a free artificial intelligence subscription. You can learn almost whatever you want because these AIs have been trained on all of the world's information, all of the ARVICs and research papers on the planet. So you have access to an Albert Einstein. Now, one of the things I try to do is I try to flip people's perspectives. At the moment, basically, we think, how can we use the technology that we have on the truck today to improve cyber defense, detect threats, whatever it happens to be? If you have access to an artificial intelligence that has 1,000 times more general knowledge than you, we can start actually asking it theoretical questions. Like, for example, how do we create an impenetrable cyber defense system? Now, I asked Anthropic this, and it says, well, we can create a cyber defense system that has random IP rotating addresses, that changes the infrastructure on a 30-minute basis. We can create honeypots and deception techniques and so on and so forth. So we call this the continuous mutation infrastructure defense system. When you then say, well, okay, how would we build this? It says, well, when we have a look at all the different tools out there today, this is very difficult to build, et cetera, et cetera. But by understanding what we could create or co-create with artificial intelligence, we can backcast and say, how do we get from here to there? So what would you do if the only thing you had access to was all the world's knowledge? Now, from an artificial intelligence perspective, there's a lot I think that maybe you don't see. OpenAI's AI is bootstrapping its own intelligence. So we train these artificial intelligences on large audio models, vision models, text models, language models. But OpenAI's AI, once it had been trained, started creating its own synthetic data to bootstrap its own intelligence. And this is all relevant for a reason I'll show you in a bit. It also creates its own knowledge. Google DeepMind, 2 years ago, learned how to play chess, but it was not taught how to play chess. So increasingly, AI makes knowledge in this way. It says, I've got this information, I put it together, I create new knowledge. As humans, we say, we've got this information, we put it together, we've got new knowledge as well. When you put human knowledge together with artificial intelligence knowledge, bearing in mind you have to make sure that it's accurate and everything else, what you end up with is a new view of the world. You end up with hybrid knowledge. And actually, when you have a look at the gaps, when you have a look at how these different things come together, some of the new things that we can discover are staggering. Now, 3 years ago, Google ran an experiment. So how many of you know about brute force attacks? Yeah, all of you, right? Okay. As we move into the future, we see a point in time where artificial intelligence will just be asked or told by an adversary to go and get you. So it's going to increasingly be AI on AI, which is where this experiment comes in interesting. So Google got 2 artificial intelligences, put them into a virtual room, put a pile of apples in the middle of the room. One artificial intelligence had access to a small amount of compute. The other artificial intelligence had access to a lot of compute. And as they're going and playing this game, when the apples are plentiful, these AIs basically aren't combating with one another at all. However, as the apples got scarcer, the artificial intelligence with more computing power, in Google's own words, started getting strategic and aggressive. It literally started creating laser beams to shoot the other artificial intelligence. So what we learn from this is the AI that has access to the most compute at the moment is able to outperform strategically the artificial intelligence with smaller amounts of compute. Now, this is important because you have access to artificial intelligences that have cost $200 million to train on 100,000 GPUs. Your adversaries have been creating large language models like FraudBERT and DarkBERT on the dark web. They do not have access to that amount of computing power, let alone training sets, et cetera, et cetera. But we're looking at computing power here. Now, as we start looking at the next generation of artificial intelligences, increasingly we see agentic artificial intelligence emerging. You'll see these being pushed and promoted by a variety of different organizations around the world. But we've also created something called the ADAS artificial intelligence framework, which means that we can create AI agents that evolve themselves. And they're also problem solving. So these AI agents will identify a problem and then try to figure out, how do you solve it? But they do that at huge scale. They do that at lightning speed. So AI basically is taking a fundamentally different twist. It's a self-developing technology now in so many different ways. Now, 3 months ago, in the labs, I saw the development of the first fully autonomous agentic cyber weapons. So these were cyber weapons based on GPT-4. And what we did is we had GPT-4 creating different agents, and these agents were tasked with breaking into military-grade defense systems. And what they did is they chained together lots of zero-day attacks. Now, they were successful in breaking into military-grade systems 53% of the time, but they did so in 2 minutes. So part of the reason why I look into the future to try to understand what the future and emerging threats are is because if we understand what those threats are, we can backcast and figure out, if that's the future, what do we need to do today to defend against that? This is how we defend against that. So in response, we've been creating fully autonomous, adaptive, multi-sensory, agentic defense systems. Now, I want to change your thinking a little bit. The reason why we've created a multi-sensory defense system is because we can hear malware. There have only been 2 experiments on this, but malware, when it hits your infrastructure, has an audio signal. So when it runs on a CPU or a hard drive, it has an audio signal. So by using large audio models, we think we might be able to actually pick it up. So when we talk about how we use artificial intelligence to identify threats, increasingly we can bring in human-like senses into our infrastructure to identify new things in new ways. Now, earlier I talked about what happens when an artificial intelligence with more computing power meets an adversary with less computing power. In Japan and in the United States, we are now building, in fact have built, 2 Zettascale artificial intelligence supercomputer platforms. And a Zettascale platform, the LINPACK rating is slightly different, but we now have 2 Zettascale artificial intelligence platforms. The current artificial intelligence models that are coming out and will be coming out in the next year cost $1 billion to train. And generally, things like GPT-5, it looks like it will have about 50 trillion parameters. So these AIs are getting bigger, but in some cases they're also getting more efficient as well. When we have a look at artificial general intelligence in 2028, you will all start having access to an artificial intelligence that has an IQ of 1,600 and 1 billion times more general knowledge than any human. So how do we start using that to our advantage? The criminals will not have access to this kind of powerful artificial intelligence. State-sponsored actors, maybe. And then we start talking about the AI that no one has really been talking about, which is already emerging, quantum artificial intelligence, which just puts this on steroids. So when you actually have a look at technology as a multiplier, what you have access to in your pocket, increasingly the numbers are just staggering. But when we kind of have a look towards 2040, the current definition of artificial superintelligence is an artificial intelligence with 10,000 times more general knowledge than any human. And however we kind of determine that, that could very well be an artificial intelligence that has an IQ of 1.5 million. We are in fundamentally different times. Now, from an artificial intelligence perspective, when we actually have a look at how we're applying artificial intelligence today, basically to defend our businesses, our organizations, and our institutions, we have artificial intelligence red teaming. So this is where increasingly we can actually use AI basically as a co-worker in our red teaming exercises. We have brainstorming and search. So using large language models and human language, we're able to search huge databases to try to figure out what are the next threat vectors. We have GRC and task automation. We have hunt and incident response, predictive patching. So when we have a look at IoT, predictive patching becomes more interesting. We've got scenario modeling. So using some of these latest artificial intelligences, it's easier for me to actually run models, basically in scenarios, faster than ever before, for less cost than ever before. And that could be security-related or it could be risk-related. And then we've obviously got traffic and risk analysis. But if we start going further, we've seen artificial intelligences quite literally replicating themselves and giving birth to new artificial intelligences, if we want to put it that way. These AIs are from organizations like Google. We are always told that emerging technology is a blank slate. It's neither good nor evil. It's humans that determine whether we use a technology for good or evil. But what would happen if we can start giving rise to artificial intelligences with a constitution that's quite literally born good? What if every AI that came off the production line had an inherent moral compass? So it was automatically, for example, a cyber policeman, if we want to use that phrase. We are already at the point where technology itself can start actually having a moral compass, because we're seeing this with platforms like Anthropic. When we talk about the code bases within our organizations, We have lots of legacy code, more than likely, lots of legacy applications, and these have got lots of different security holes and vulnerabilities. So, using generative artificial intelligence, we can update all of our legacy applications faster than ever before. Amazon recently updated 30,000 Java applications. They saved 4,500 years of software development and saved $256 million in software development by using generative AI. So you can update your legacy applications and legacy code stacks faster than ever before. In addition to that, when we talk about artificial intelligence being a universal translator for humans, it's also increasingly a universal translator for code. So we can convert COBOL and Fortran code into the latest Python, Ruby, or Java code. So again, if you want to migrate your existing application estate to more secure, modern code bases, maybe memory-safe code bases, then we can do that. We can sanitize code. So as you're developing code, these artificial intelligences will scan for proofs of vulnerability. And they will do that pretty much in real time, which then means you can do continuous release. It used to be the case you develop code and then you'd release the code 2-3 weeks later once you'd tested it. But we can now do continuous development and testing and release. So you can be securer faster. But I talked about multi-sensory artificial intelligence. What if we actually used machine vision to identify new threats? At the University of Portsmouth, we've been developing artificial intelligences that see malware, see phishing. Because when you actually use machine vision to have a look at code, good code looks like one thing. Bad code looks different, particularly when you do color grading and all these kinds of different things. We can also see stupid. So we all know people are clicking different phishing links and all that kind of stuff. However, with some of the artificial intelligence companies out there, they're releasing things like Recall, which will actually use an AI to watch your screen. Now, what if you had an artificial intelligence watching your employees' screens in a safe, compliant way, and that AI, backed with all the information that it has, says, just don't click that link. I saw you moving the mouse to click that link. Or this link here, that's probably an evil link. What if you can actually use an AI to monitor your employees' stupid behavior? Because we all talk about education and employees, right? The endpoint threat. And what if we could see crime? My son, who's 12, recently saw $100 million in crypto being drained thanks to an Elon Musk 2-for-1 deepfake crypto scam. 200,000 people in real time lost $100 million of crypto. What if the AI basically was able to actually see that and then report it to all of the authorities in real time? Authorities that have still not taken any action, by the way. When we talk about deepfakes, they will get to a point basically where you cannot tell a deepfake from a real thing. Arup just lost $25 million in a deepfake scam. Deepfakes basically will simply get to the point where in a game of cat and mouse, it's going to be very, very hard for you to actually figure out what is real from what's not. And while we have different tools coming through, the fact of the matter is, it is a game of cat and mouse. So when you have a look at your own internal communications, do you apply watermarks to your internal communications? Invisible watermarks, so that when you're doing a Teams call, for example, the artificial intelligence in your business recognizes the invisible watermark and says, yep, that's fine. This is an internal communication with a real internal team, and this one isn't. This has no watermark, so it's an external hacker trying to get at you. And then when we talk about analyzing deepfakes, yes, we can do Gaussian blurring. We can detect different patterns, basically within AI-generated images and deepfakery stuff. We can use AI to analyze voice patterns. There's all kinds of different things we can do. And increasingly, we can use artificial intelligence combined with LiDAR to actually see the person's real face, even if they're in a different country, not the one they present on screen. By applying sensory information to artificial intelligence in the critical national infrastructure space, we can use artificial intelligences that feel heat. They can feel when a pump is getting a little bit warm, and that just seems a bit strange. We can feel the vibrations of an oil well basically being turned on or off. So there are all of these different things that we increasingly have within our arsenal when we start looking at what AI can actually do. But also what we can do from a human ingenuity perspective. When we talk about adversarial displays, one of the threats that I saw recently is the ability to exfiltrate data and watch what you are doing on your computer screen by listening to the individual pixels in your computer screen, and then using AI to recompile that sound to present the attackers with an image of what you are looking at. We've also seen the use of audio exfiltration to get people's fingerprints and biometrics, like facial scans. So when we have a look at some of the latest threats that are actually coming through, we can use artificial intelligence to introduce adversarial noise into your computer screens, an adversarial white noise basically into your microphones that disrupt some of the latest audio exfiltration attacks that you might not have even thought were possible. When we have a look at remote workers, one of my clients is a very large American government department, and they have 30,000 remote employees. And a little while ago, basically, they got very, very freaked out because they found out that North Korean hackers basically actually had access to most of their core systems. So, yes. So, when we actually have a look at the use of artificial intelligence kind of at endpoints, basically to actually analyze consumer behavior, one of the most basic things I think we can do from a remote worker perspective is stylometric detection. Because this particular government agency would have hired Brian. Brian then passed his keyboard over to the North Korean hackers. They type in a fundamentally different way. They also breathe differently and everything else. The amount of sensory and biometric and biomarker information that we can capture from computer systems is stunning. So this is where we lean on healthcare. So trying to detect remote workers basically is we have a lot of new tools in our kit bag. When we have a look at predictive defense, it's generally believed, in terms of stats, that an adversary will loiter within your infrastructure for about 180 days before they're found. Yeah? At the moment, you are all mice, because the cats are the criminals and the gangs basically who are coming after you. You react. You put up these big walls to try to defend your businesses you are trying to defend. What if you could predict where the next attack is going to be? Now, this is very difficult. We're not going to underscore this. But a little while ago, an organization called Fortinet basically used blockchain on-chain analysis to identify that Euler Hermes was going to lose $250 million worth of crypto off their blockchain protocol. 2 minutes later, it went. When we have a look at organizations around the world, there are a couple of organizations that are increasingly trawling information on the dark web, and they're seeing the rise of chatter in one forum. Maybe this forum says Walmart, and this other forum says, I would like to attack them, and this other forum says, I have an exploit to attack them. Increasingly using artificial intelligence, basically we put all these different dark web data sets together and we say, Walmart, we think that you are going to be attacked by this group, and we think the attack will be this vector. However, when we have a look at how people get into your infrastructure, IT or OT, whatever we're talking about, increasingly we can use artificial intelligence to try to predict where would they attack. Because there are patterns basically in attacks. And so then we kind of come to this. If you create a digital twin of your organization, not just your infrastructure, but your processes and people and so on and so forth, which is becoming much easier to do than ever before, then in simulation, you can run artificial intelligence-powered pen tests. So in a safe environment, air-gapped if you want, you can run a simulation using artificial intelligence of where are the vulnerabilities. What have you spotted? What have you not spotted? AI can then generate a gap analysis and say, well, I ran 100 million attacks on your digital twin, and I broke in here. And then you simply say, well, how would I remediate that? And it says, well, these top 10, these are the highest impact risks. So to remediate these, I think, you need to update your firmware, you need to improve threat detection, you need to improve the training for your staff, or whatever it happens to be. So what happens, again, basically, when we combine human penetration testers with artificial intelligence-powered penetration testers? What happens when you use the power of these systems to literally try to ruin your company, but you do it in a controlled, measured environment? So when we talk about artificial intelligence, you have access to artificial intelligences that are far superior and much, much more powerful than anything that your adversaries have. You have access to artificial intelligences that can not only augment your own tools and what you do, but also you. So how many of you are actually using AI basically to its full capabilities? How many of you are actually pushing the boundaries of what it can do to defend your organizations? Because increasingly, you don't just have access to your own team's talent and to the Fortinet team's talent. You have access to artificial intelligences that make Albert Einstein look slightly less impressive. So thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed that, and stay safe.